will not have class next week. We'll have class till September. So, the Wednesday after Labor Day. Is that right?
The one more tomorrow at a Labor Day.
Yeah.
Holiday to holiday.
Well, remember at the end of 1 Kings 21 last week, Ahab had, or Jezebel had killed, or had Naboth killed, and Elijah confronted him and told him that the dogs would lick up his blood in the place where Naboth had died and so forth. So the judgment. And that, by the way, his kingdom would be taken away from him, but not in his days, but in the days of his son. And that's where we saw the place where Ahab covered himself in sackcloth and fasted and wept. And God said, do you see how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I'll not bring the evil in his days, but I'll bring evil upon his house in his son's days. So, in chapter 22, verse 1, which is where we are today, last chapter of the book of 1 Kings, how long passed before there was war between Aram and Israel? 3 years. Now, if 3 years has passed, you might get pretty relaxed. You might get pretty settled. By the way, who is Aram?
Syria.
Syria. So, in the 3rd year of Jehoshaphat, the king of, in the 3rd year, by the way, that's this 3rd year, the 3 years, that's the time. No war for 3 years, but in the 3rd year, in which there was no war, Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. Now, you know my stuff and how I think. This is just free stuff. Geography. When you look at your map, where is Israel from Judah? From Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why does he say he came down?
Because Jerusalem's on the mountain.
That's like us Americans saying, we're gonna go down to Arkansas. Because the geography, Jerusalem and Judah is higher topographically, well, that's easy to, I'll try to say that, than Samaria. So he actually came down. Now that's just free, that don't have anything to do with our salvation, folks. But the Bible is always true about every little thing, even the geography. And people have tried to discredit the Bible from geography. And of course, it's impossible. Harry Rimmer, I think, was the old apologetist that turned of the century, early 1900s, I guess. In the college circuit about Christian evidences, and he did a lot of that. If you've never read any Harry Rimmer stuff, it's interesting reading. Now, but just to show us where we are, and not to belabor the point, I don't want to outline on the introduction. Here's Ahab, and here's Jehoshaphat. But remember that we're going through Ahab's life until he dies, and then we'll come back and get Jehoshaphat, because the time span from here to here and here to here, is different. So, just to remind you, when you're studying Kings, how to study it. So, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. The king of Israel said to his servants, what? Moab has control of it. Syria has control of Ramoth Gilead, but it belongs to us. And we're doing nothing about it.
Yep.
So, yeah, let's go fight. That's right. Let's go fight. Let's go take it back. But notice that, evidently the king of Israel had been saying that to his servants, in recent times. And then when Jehoshaphat comes, he asks him, will you go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, what? Now what should he have said? Because isn't the north worshiping idols? Aren't they worshiping Ahab and Jezebel, folks? Jezebel's his wife. Aren't they worshiping Baal and so forth? And so he's saying, I'm as you are, my people are your people, we're one, let's go battle, Should he have been saying that? Probably not. Now you can think about that any way you want to. But Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, what? Ask God first and see if we can win this battle. Now, so what did the king of Israel do? How many prophets?
400.
Oh, where does that number come from? How many prophets did Elijah kill? 450 prophets of Baal. How many prophets of the Asherah were there when Elijah killed the 450 prophets of Baal? Y'all remember that, huh? 400. They're still left. 400 are still left. And so the king gathered all these prophets together and said, shall I go up against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall I refrain? And they said, go up, for the Lord will give it into the hand of the king. Now, notice the context. What did Jehoshaphat say? And notice that the word Lord here is capitalized. So is there not yet a prophet of Jehovah? So guess what he knew about those 400 prophets? He knows they're not prophets of the Lord. They're not prophets of Jehovah. So isn't there a prophet of the Lord that we can inquire of? And Ahab said to Jehoshaphat, there is yet one man by whom we may inquire of Jehovah. But I hate him. Uh-oh. Why do I hate him?
Because he don't say what he
Because
wants to
he
say.
never says anything good about me. He never says anything good about me. He is Micah, the son of Imlah. Joshua said, let not the king say so.
Didn't that happen once before to Jeremiah?
Yeah, when they asked him oh yeah. 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 But remember that Jeremiah was later. So Jeremiah just before the captivity. And of course this is at the beginning of the separation of the king. So the king called an officer and said, bring him here, bring Micaiah here. And so here they are. They're up there sitting at the throne of the king of Israel in their robes. And all the prophets were prophesying before them. And Zedekiah, the son of Kenaiah, I don't know how to say that. You got two vowels there. Sound like an Indian name, doesn't it? Kenaiah. Made horns of iron for himself. See, so he's visual, made horns. And said, with these you will gore the Arameans until they're consumed. So he's working out a physical demonstration. And all the prophets are prophesying, saying, go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper, for the Lord will give it into the hand of the king.
Joseph, I wondered,
not new.
Yeah.
See, that's their history. Did y'all remember what was Kevin Costner's movie, Dances with Wolves? If you hadn't seen it, that's a pretty good movie if you hadn't seen it. But anyway, they go on that buffalo hunt, and he kills the buffalo, and then after they're all over there and they're telling their stories about the buffaloes, you know, and acting them out, and then how Costner does the thing, how he shot him down and he fell right there, and he acts it out. But that's not anything new. That's not an American or a Western culture thing. They did that way back in the Eastern, and still do, by the way. Still do when they're telling their stories. One of the problems that we have in our modern world, folks, is we don't have storytellers, do we? And our storytellers have to be told in movies.
Yeah.
We don't have storytellers. And yet, you know, there are a few storytellers. There's a guy who's a member of the church, by the way, who just tells Bible stories. He goes around and does, you know, and tells. And interestingly enough, he makes a pretty good living out of it because he's in demand as a speaker. But very few good Bible storytellers, just plain storytellers. You know why? Because people don't read anymore, and so they don't have they don't have to imagine. They get the picture on the TV or whatever, and they don't have to use their mind to imagine what's going on. And one of the ways that's important for us to study the Bible, folks, is to see the text, and envision what's going on. Well, that's you know, that's kind of a political platform of mine in the church. So we don't read anymore. We don't read Bible anymore. And generally speaking, by the way, those who do read don't read the Bible much. They read commentaries and other books, but they don't read the Bible a whole lot, which is kind of sad to me too. Okay, that's my sermon, and I'm sticking to it. So all these prophets, you see, are prophesying, go up to Ramoth Gilead and you're going to win. So what did the messenger tell Micaiah? All the prophets are speaking favorably to the king. They're telling him what he wants to hear. So when you get there, speak favorably to the king. That's what the messenger said. So they're putting the pressure on him to say what the king wants to hear. So we have a prophet of God in opposition to all these 400 prophets, and he's supposed to say the same thing they do. Of course, by the way, we don't have any applications like that.
There's plenty of peer pressure.
The need to say the same thing that everybody else said. But Micaiah said, as the Lord lives, whatever the Lord says to me, that's what I'll speak. So, when he came to the king, he asked him, are we going to go to battle or not? And he said, what? Did you read that? How did he say it, you think? How do you think he said that? All the prophets around are, you know, I know Zedekiah, you know, he's running around with the horn saying, you're going to win, go up and you'll win. And old Micaiah comes along and says, okay, Micaiah, what are you going to do? He said, yeah, go on up there, you'll win. You can almost feel the sarcasm dripping off of it. Or maybe we can't. Maybe we just want to read some words and say what it says. Yeah, go on up and succeed. Well, guess what? The king responded, what?
He knew he was being sarcastic.
Yeah. So how did he know he was being sarcastic?
By the way he told it.
I think the way he said it. Again, we got words on a page and we got a conversation here. What's the story, folks? What's going on? What's the reality? How many times must I tell you, don't speak anything but the truth to me? Guess what he knew? Micaiah was speaking a lie when he said, go up and at least, and Micaiah was saying. So that's another interesting thing to me. So if he knew Micaiah would tell him the truth, and Micaiah says sarcastically, yeah, go ahead up and win, and he said, you quit lying to me, guess what he should have known?
He couldn't go up.
He should have known he shouldn't go up. And so Micaiah said, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains like sheep having no shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let each of them return to his house in peace. And Ahab turned to Jehoshaphat and said, didn't I tell you he wouldn't say anything good about me? Didn't I tell you he wouldn't prophesy good, but evil? So, you're not going to win. The people are going to be scattered like sheep without a shepherd. So the people of Israel. So what should Ahab have known about going up to battle? He ain't coming back. But he had an inkling that something's bad's going to happen. Because when you read the story, Micaiah said, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne and all the hosts of heaven standing by him on his right and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab to go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said this while another said that. So the host of heaven up there telling God, God says, who's going to go? And one says, I'll go. I'll get him to do this. I'll get him to do that. No, that ain't going to work. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, by the way, what's this? A spirit. Now, how's that spirit going to communicate with Ahab? Through the mouth of the false prophets. So the Spirit of the Lord is going to work through the mouth of the false prophets. He said, I'll entice him. The Lord said, how? He said, I'll go out and be a deceiving spirit in the mouth of his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him and prevail. Go do so. Now, so if you go do that, he'll believe you. He'll listen. He'll respond. So behold, the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets. And the Lord has proclaimed disaster against you. Now, I think it's 2 Thessalonians, but it may be 1 Thessalonians. Nope, right here. Chapter 2. When he talks about the man of lawlessness that will come during the days of the Jewish people of that generation, when the apostasy came, he says, y'all can read it all, he comes back to say, the one who's coming is in accord with the activity of Satan. Remember, Satan is adversary, with power and signs and false wonders, with deception of wickedness for those who perish, because, why? They did not receive a love of the truth so as to be saved. And for this reason, God will send on them what? A deluding influence, so that they will believe what?
A lie.
They will believe what's false. Now, folks, that is not miraculous. God didn't make them believe a lie.
They wanted to.
Their heart was of such a nature that they didn't love the truth. They wanted to hear what they wanted to hear. And folks, that's the Judaizers. That's the Jews. And they deceived many. And remember, I'm just showing you the text of the New Testament, y'all. I'm coming back to. Remember in Matthew chapter 24, he said, many false prophets will arise and mislead many, because lawlessness is increased. Most people's love will grow cold. The one who endures to the end will be saved. That's talking about the end of the Jewish nation, the judgment. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then what? The end will come. So it's that generation. Well, that's nothing new, by the way. God shows in the Old Testament that that's been at work, all the time. If you don't love the truth, folks, and I forgot what the old boy that did the country song, he said his daddy told him if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Well, if you don't love the truth, folks, then you may believe a lie. So he told, we get this story. Ahab and Jehoshaphat is talking about going to fight, and up in heaven, the heavenly picture, and this, I'm using that word accommodatively, y'all, in the spiritual realm. God and his messengers are, how are we going to deal with this? Well, I'm not sure always how to deal with things, again. God has to talk to us in words and pictures that we can understand.
Well, that's not literally that.
I know. I don't think you could. See, that's what we want to do, so we can think about pie in the sky when you die by and by stuff. But remember that the spirits, folks, are his messengers. Let me go back to 1 John 1. I just keep preaching on it. Let me quit. In 1 John 4, John said, don't what? Don't believe every spirit, but test the what?
Spirit.
Whether they're from God. Because why? Many false prophets have gone out in the world. Who are the false? Who are the spirits that you're supposed to test? The prophets. Because every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. Every spirit that does not confess is not from God. So when that prophet comes along preaching, if he don't preach Jesus as the Messiah, you don't believe him. That's the point here. That's the whole context here. And of course, ultimately, our modern preachers want it to be to us, don't they? And then we want to talk about it. Anyway. Okay. So, Micaiah says, the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouth of all your prophets, and the Lord has proclaimed disaster against you. And then Zedekiah, the old boy with the horns, came near and struck Micaiah on the cheek and said, what? See, he's running around saying, you're going to win. You're going to go on the old Syrians just like this, horns on, He's speaking for God. And here goes Micaiah and says, no, you ain't going to win. And so he slaps him and says, when did the prophet of the Lord's in me? When did he pass from me to you? Because you're telling an opposite message of what I'm telling. See the point? And Micaiah said, behold, you shall see on that day when you enter an inner room to hide yourself. Now, who's going to enter an inner room to hide himself?
Chia. The son of
Yeah,
Zedekiah.
Zedekiah. Then the king of Israel said, take Micaiah and return him to Ammon the governor and put him in prison and feed him sparingly on bread and water till I come. Until I return safely, he said. And then Micaiah said something that lets us know about how you find out if a prophet is a prophet of God or not. How do you know a man's a prophet of God?
If what he prophesies comes true.
If what he prophesies comes to pass, he's from God. If it don't, he ain't. The message is a false message. Now, again, bless our hearts, in our modern world, how many people have we heard say, and I use old Hal Lindsey, how many times has Hal Lindsey prophesied the end of the world? Well, at least 4 in our lifetime. How many times have we been wrong? At least 4 in our lifetime. How many times will he be wrong? Every time he says it. How many times will people believe him? Every time he says it. If you return safely, the Lord has not spoken by me, Micaiah said. And he said, listen, all you people. Kind of sounds like Jesus in the New Testament when he says, if you have ears, hear. Let the one who has ears hear. So, they go up to battle. The king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, and oh, by the way, who's the king of Israel now? Ahab, the husband of Jezebel. Okay? He's the one who, she killed Naboth so he could get the vineyards. That was the story in the chapter just before this, you see. That's what made Elijah come and prophesy for God against him, because that was the straw that broke the camel's back. But the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and go into the battle, but you put on your kingly robes. You put on your robes and your crown and let everybody see you're the king. And I'll disguise myself so they won't know I'm the king. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm Jehoshaphat, I think I'll say, well, wait a minute.
I know.
I don't know. I don't know about this, old boy.
They're gonna be trying to kill me. They think I'm the king.
So if they see I'm the king, and you're not the king, and that's exactly what happens, you see. That's exactly the story. The king of Israel disguised himself. The king of Syria had commanded 32 captains of his chariots, don't fight with the small or the great, but with the king of Israel alone. So you seek out the chief. I was watching John Wayne and the Searchers again this week, that's the old movie, the Indian battle. And there were just a few of them, and the Indians are coming across the river, and what they say do? What the guys, what they say? Shoot the chief, and all the Indians will go back. So they shoot the chief as he comes across the river, and all the Indians go back. Well, that's the idea. Shoot the chief. The battle's won.
It's like the New Testament, strike the sheep. Strike the shepherd and the sheep is scattered.
That's right. Good point. So, when the captain of the chariot saw Jehoshaphat dressed in his kingly robes, they said, surely it's the king of Israel, and they turned aside to fight against him. And he cried out, wait a minute, I'm the king of Judah. I'm not Ahab. And when they saw that it was not the king of Israel, they turned back from pursuing him. Only the king of Israel, you say. Hello, Ahab was kind of, wise dude. But, as one of my teachers said, we have at least one of the first recorded accounts of a guided missile in the history of the world. A certain man, don't know who he was at random, drew his bow and struck the king of Israel in a joint in his armor. King of Israel, disguised, he's got his armor on. The guy just takes an arrow and shoots it up in the air, and it hits a place that the armor doesn't protect the king. Just random.
Yeah, right.
Just coincidence. So he, that is Ahab, said to the driver, turn around and take me out of the fight, for I'm severely wounded. And he was. The battle raged that day. The king was propped up in his chariot in front of the Assyrians, and he died at evening. And the blood from the wound ran down into the bottom of the chariot. Now that's significant. Because guess where they're going to wash the chariot?
The dogs are gonna lick his blood.
Yeah, in the same place Naboth was killed over in his vineyard where he got it, which is exactly what the prophet said. The dog's going to lick up your blood there. A cry passed through the army, the sun said, every man to his city and his country. So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. Whoops, not too far. They washed the, where they go?
38.
They washed the king's chariot by the pool of Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood. Now, Harlot, by the way, Harlot slays himself there. Now, that's going to be interesting, too, whenever Jezebel dies. And, by the way, they licked up his blood according to the word of the Lord which he had spoken. So God's prophecy came true. Always. The rest of the acts of Ahab and all that he did, the ivory house which he built, all the cities which he built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Now, that's not the Chronicles that we have. Because the Chronicles that we have are Chronicles about the kings of Judah, but they're not really the Chronicles of the kings of Judah, because you don't get to the kings until 2nd Chronicles, folks. First Chronicles starts with Adam. Y'all haven't read First Chronicles in a while, have you? First Chronicles goes back to Adam and goes down to the history. Remember that First and Second Chronicles were written to the Jews who came back out of captivity. The books of Kings were written to show why they went into captivity. So Ahab stuck with his fathers, and Ahaziah's son became king in his place. Now, remember, as I told you, we go back to, see, we got Ahab till he died, and Ahab started reigning during the reign of Asa. So when Asa died, we picked up Ahab. But now that Ahab's died, we got to go back here and pick up Jehoshaphat. Because Kings deals with the kings of both Judah and Israel, and he does them in their chronological order as they interrelate to each other. So we'll get, say, Jehoshaphat. So we go back to get Jehoshaphat, son of Asa. And he became king over Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. Well, how many years did Ahab reign?
Not me.
22 years. So Jehoshaphat started reigning in the 4th year of Ahab. So how many years were Jehoshaphat and Ahab contemporary with each other? 18 years. 4 from 22. About 18 years. So that's, again, that's the way you study kings, folks. Remember, we study kings and we wonder, why is he jumping back and forth and back and forth? Well, he's jumping back and forth because he takes the king all the way through to the end of his life, and then he picks up the next contemporary king. Now, so Jehoshaphat, son of Asa, became king over Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. He was 35 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 25 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Sheli. Now, I'm not sure what that means to you and me, but it meant something to them. And like I said, I'm not sure. But evidently, remember, Azubah was one of the wives of Asa. Now, Asa his father. He did not turn aside from doing right in the sight of the Lord. Now, if we go back to Asa,
He wasn't a good king.
until the end of his life. That's interesting. And at the end of his life, he changed and he straightened out, which is another story. Remember Ahab in Israel, he cried to the Lord, and the Lord said, okay, I won't send a punishment in his day. I'll send it in his son's day. I don't always know how to deal with that, folks, except we got to know that it's physical, not spiritual. Deal with all that other stuff. So he walked in the ways of his father. He did not turn aside from doing right. However, the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. Now remember that the high places are of course places where they sacrificed. But they tore down the high places that were built for the idols. But they left the high places that were built to worship Yahweh. Just context, man, I'm sorry. Just deal with it. Most of the time we read this and we think, well, he still worshipped some idols. Well, probably not. That was the high places used for Yahweh, not for the idols. Okay, so we get this little Reader's Digest capsule thing, Jehoshaphat made peace with the king of Israel. Well, we found that when we went to see the king and they went out to war together and that whole process. We're just getting a capsule of his life, but we already read that. We knew that. And the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat and his might, which he showed, how he warred, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And that's not the Chronicles that we know, that we have. And it's interesting, the remnants of the Sodomites who remained in the days of his father Asa, he expelled from the land. So he was a little better than his father. But again, I'm not sure always how to deal with things, but remember those two witnesses who laid in the streets of the great city in Revelation chapter 11, it's about verse 8 or so, and the people who killed the two witnesses were called Egyptians and Sodomites. Why Sodomites? Immoral. Why Egyptian? Captivity. Bondage. So through the Old Testament, you see, you get that picture of to let you know that immorality now, interestingly enough, there was no king in Edom. What are we doing with Edom? Well, we'll talk about that because, see, Jehoshaphat made ships to go to get gold. But they didn't go, for the ships were broken at Ezion-Geber. Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, said, let my servants go to your servants, but Jehoshaphat was not willing. Thank goodness, he finally learned his lesson not to ally himself with Israel. But Jehoshaphat slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. What city? Jerusalem. And Jehoram, his son, became king in his place. And then Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel. So again, we get through with Jehoshaphat. Ahab dies before Jehoshaphat dies. So the next king we pick up is his son. Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel and Samaria. In the 17th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he reigned 2 years over Israel. And he did like his father did. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, walked in the way of his father, Ahab, in the way of his mother, Jezebel, in the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin. So back to the very beginning. So he served Baal and worshipped him and provoked the Lord God of Israel to anger. The Jehovah God of Israel to anger, according to all that his father had done.
But they love that Baal worship.
Yeah.
Always back to the girl Baal.
Now, again, Ahab was sorrowful that, God prophesied against him for what he's done, and God, spares the judgment against his time and later. But we have the story that, his sons just propagate his evil. That's what they do. Now, folks, that's where we're going to stop. However, you're going to forget between now and then, and know that we're going to start 2 Kings, and so I probably ought not to say anything more until we get back, just because you won't remember anything I say. But in 2 Kings, you see, we'll take up the story of Elijah and Elisha, and we'll start getting that change of the prophecy that God said, go anoint Hazael king of Syria, Jehu king of Israel, and Elisha the prophet. Elisha will take Elijah's place. Jehu will take Ahab's dynasty's place, change the dynasty. And Hazael will take the place of Benaniah, the king of Syria. So, just a continuation. By the way, if you were looking at the Jewish tonight, the Bible, they would have 1st and 2nd and 3rd and 4th Kings. They wouldn't have 1st Samuel and 2nd Samuel. They would have 4 books of Kings. And then the Chronicles would be at the end of their book, the last 2 books of their Bible. 39, what's 39 in the Old Testament about ours? How many books in the Old Testament, John?
39.
What's the last book of
Malachi.
Malachi? See, ours is Malachi. Theirs is Chronicles. Now, okay. I'm through.